I'd like to talk today about some changes since Richard Nixon became president. As you know, or may realize or remember, he ran for president on the platform of law and order. He was going to protect us. There wasn't much question, at that time at least, what law and order meant or what it was supposed to mean. What it was interpreted as was, let's get the minorities. We don't like the minorities, they commit a lot of crimes, and we're in this situation we are because of them. There were Black Panthers out there causing hell, raising hell. There were the Martin Luther King people demanding equal rights and things such as this. There was the Symbionese Liberation Army. There was the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund. All kinds of turmoil. While the corporations in this country were trying to take over more oil fields and drug cultivation centers, things such as that, in order to fund more clandestine operations. With the fall of Dien Bien Phu in Vietnam, the United States took over the position of the French intelligence services there and became the captain of the opium trade. That, in conjunction with the Chinese nationalists across the border, led by Madame Chiang of Chiang Kai-shek fame, and Henry Luce of Time magazine fame, and various other members of the power elite. And there was all kinds of turmoil going on, and Nixon decided to put an end to it, or at least put an end to it as far as perception was concerned, and make himself look like a crime fighter. The real problem was there wasn't much crime in the federal arena. Most crimes were state crimes committed against the state. So they had to come up with a few enforcement rules in order to broaden the federal jurisdiction. The main battleground was that of drugs, narcotic drugs and non-narcotic drugs. That gave them an excuse to extend jurisdiction. Secondly, they needed a show of force by incarcerating more people. So for 10 centuries, there's been the concept of bond, and bond has been invented, or was invented, to make sure somebody attended court. And that was since the Norman invasion and the development of Anglo-Saxon common law. Now, the other law system had originated with the Romans, and was called civil law, Roman civil law. It was changed by Napoleon and became the Napoleonic Code. The main differences between the two systems were on the common law system. Power came from the bottom up, and under the Roman system or Napoleonic system, power was from the top down. One ruled by decree in the Roman Code and by consensus in common law. Well, a lot of the public thought then at that time, we need to be protected from all these criminals. Nobody really paid much attention to what criminals we needed to be protected from, but it was understood that mostly they were people in the minority community that didn't know their place. Uppity blacks is what they were called by certain segments of our society. And they were all parading around demanding rights. At the same time, young people were demanding that we get out of the war in Vietnam and forgo the profits for the big multinationals. And it was a real bad time of upheaval. Well, that's about the time I started practicing law. And at that time, there were less than 500,000 people incarcerated. In the prison system of this country, now there's close to 5 million. So I know I'm old, but I don't think I'm quite that old. Anyway, the Nixon administration goes into all this legislation and lobbying for law and order. And one of the things they wanted to do was this concept of preventive detention, which meant if you thought somebody was dangerous, you could keep him in jail until his trial, which is a Napoleonic concept, except for the Napoleonic concept has a tribunal of 3 judges rather than 1 judge. So, we start holding people for trial. We start denying bond. Now, John Mitchell, who was the Attorney General during the Nixon administration, asserted in front of the Bar Association in a speech that the United States public would never ever go for preventive detention. But they forgot about the power of the advertising industry, the public relations industry, a group that market fear as Procter & Gamble markets soap. So after a fear campaign and a public relations campaign, the idea of preventive detention didn't seem so foreign. So we started locking up people and denying bond if we thought or somebody thought they might be dangerous to the community. Well, that turned into a big racket and later developed into privatized prisons and got to the point where we are today. It came into real good focus during the presidential campaign involving Governor Dukakis of Massachusetts. He was blamed for a parole system that let somebody out, and that person who got out on parole ended up killing somebody, and they blamed it on Dukakis because it was under his watch. It just shows how stupid the public is and how powerful public relations are. Anyway, we start having preventive detention. In the next episode, I will tell you about how these dangerous people used to appear in court all the time without bonds and preventive detention.
Screw this screw in.